Hey, it's Michelle from Hamilton Roots. Just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes this evening about propagations. A couple different ways that you can propagate. If you've got some plants that need to be cleaned up or started over, or maybe you have just purchased some cuttings, whether they have leaves on them or they're bare node. There's just a couple different ways that you can do this, and we're going to go over them here. First thing we're going to talk about is propagation and sphagnum moss. What you're going to need for that is sphagnum moss, a container to hydrate your moss. You're going to want some type of clear container to do the propagation in. If you're going to do a lot of propagations, I recommend a little bit larger tote like this with a locking lid. If you just want to have a couple things going, you can use a little clear takeout container. You want to make sure the lid is clear because light is going to have to pass through. Some type of good light source, whether you're going to put this in front of a window, under a grow light, some way that it's going to receive good light to really develop those roots. First thing we're going to do is hydrate our moss. So I'm going to pour some water. This is just some moss we had in a bowl from before. Pour some water in there, and I think we're probably going to need some more. Just going to make sure that's soaking pretty good. It's a good time you can kind of go through your moss and pick out stems or like real woody pieces. I don't care to leave those in my boxes. But while that's getting good and soaked in there, we will work on our cuttings. I've got a couple of nodes here already, just bare node, that I'm going to stick in cups. But this was a piece of my Monstera Adansonii that had grown, but just was not looking so good. Had lost some leaves. I'm not the best at watering my plants at home. So we're just going to chop it up and see what we can do with it here. When I do cuttings, all the nodes are the places where new leaves would grow out. And sometimes you can see a little nub on there where an aerial root wanted to start. This is where our roots are going to grow and where new growth will come from. So we want to cut between all of those. We can take off little pieces of foliage there, but I'm going to cut in between these. Just a leaf. Leave about a ½ inch to an inch on either side of your node, so that's going to be kind of like a trash piece. And we'll leave that one. So we should have some good moss. The way we're going to do this is in these little 5-ounce cups. It'll make it very easy if you're going to have different things propagating at the same time. It's really easy to label your plastic cup as opposed to something like this where you've just got it full of moss and the nodes laying on top. It's hard to know what's what until it really starts having some growth on it. So these can be labeled. It's probably going to be filled up with all the same thing. So I'm not going to label them, but all you need is a Sharpie. So I'm going to take, you want to wring it out, put some moss in the cups. We're going to fill them about halfway full. Some more stems, I'm going to pick that out. Then you're just gonna take a cutting. I'm gonna put a little bit of moss around the node and we'll stick it right down. Right down in there. It's gonna go in our box just like that. Here's a little bare noded piece. We'll wrap that. Stick it on top. If you feel like you need to add some more on one side or another, go ahead and do that. You can always add and remove as you feel necessary once they're in your box and you really get a feel for what they're doing, if they're gonna grow. So I got everything in cups in here. Just to mention too, so if you have all bare node cuttings, moss is really going to be the best way to propagate. When you try to propagate in water with bare nodes, they pretty much just sink to the bottom and rot. So either in a cup, or if you have a container like this, you would just sort of fill the bottom with moss. You're going to keep it moist, whether you drill the holes in the top or open it every couple days, totally up to you. But that's pretty much moss propagation. Just clip that lid on there. And the other way that I like to propagate. Now, instead of moss, you can also propagate. You can use perlite. You can use leca. I like moss better than those two, so that's what we primarily use here at home, but that's totally up to you. It's really fun just to experiment with the different ways and then see what works best for you, what you like best. I know a lot of people that really like to grow in leca, and so it's just fun to try all the things. If you have cuttings that have leaves on them, I like to just put them in a jar of water. There's a lot of different things you can buy on Amazon, on Etsy, that are real cute, test tubes, other little scientific looking jars, but mason jars work just fine. So these have been in water for a little bit. You can see the little roots starting on here. You just want to make sure you keep the leaf out of the water. Any kind of foliage is going to rot if it's down in the water. So just keep those all hanging out. Keep your node down in the water or right on the surface of it is sometimes okay. The root will reach for the water that's underneath. If you're gonna propagate in water, you wanna make sure you keep all the leaves or any kind of foliage out of the water. It's gonna rot. You want to keep your water changed. Change it about every week, maybe every 2 weeks, just so you keep it oxygenated and to prevent any kind of scummy buildup in there that will increase your chances of your propagations rotting. And so that is another thing to mention in the propagation box here. I made sure that none of my leaves were down in the wet moss. I kept them all up on top. Or hanging out. Well, I tried to at least. out of the moss itself. And once they're in there, you just want to make sure it stays damp in there. If you need to top them off with a little bit of water, that's totally fine. And once they're in there, you want to make sure they stay wet, not soggy wet, just damp. Once you've got things how you want, you just want to put it somewhere under a good light source, but put it there and sort of forget about it. It's going to take weeks for these roots to develop. It's not going to happen overnight. You may want to check them every night, because I do, but after a while, just give up, let it go. When you come back a week or two later, you're going to be like, oh, there's some roots on there, and get really excited. So happy propagating. I hope this was helpful.